Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a fascinating and I think surprisingly relevant intellectual problem today. The topic. What happens when the very definition of wisdom gets corrupted? You know, when we spend our most precious resource, our time chasing, well, intellectual junk food instead of soul food.
That's exactly the paradox, isn't it? It's right there in this text we're looking at. Knowledge, ilm, is seen as inherently good. It's an attribute of the divine.
Right.
So the argument goes, knowledge itself can't really be blamed. The fault, it always lies in how it's applied or maybe the negative effect it ends up having on people.
Exactly. And that distinction is really driving our deep dives today. We're going to quickly unpack the three main reasons the text gives for condemning certain types of knowledge.
Okay.
But then, and this is the really interesting part, I think, we're going to zero in on what feels like an intellectual betrayal. The argument that these foundational religious concepts, things like spiritual insight, fıkh, and monotheism, tevhîd, were somehow stripped of their depth by later generations, leading seekers completely off track.
Yeah, that's the core of it, the corruption of terms.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah.
If knowledge is inherently good, why does this text even need to condemn certain kinds? What's the first type that gets called out?
Well, the first one is pretty straightforward. It's knowledge that causes direct damage or harm.
Okay.
This is where the text puts things like sorcery, magic, talismans. It isn't really debating if magic works.
It accepts that it can.
It accepts that it can, yeah. It even cites the Quran, noting its power is such that it can actually cause separation between spouses.
Wow. So that moves it out of just abstract philosophy and into, like, real-world ethical failure. The knowledge is wrong because the outcome is destructive.
Precisely. Destructive to the person who has it or to others. The text even brings up that very specific story.
About the Prophet Muhammad being afflicted.
That's the one. Afflicted by magic until divine intervention showed the way out. It really underscores the point. If the highest virtue, knowledge, produces the lowest vice, which is harm, then you've got to abandon it.
That's a very clear line. Okay, what about the second category? This one seems a bit different, maybe less about direct harm and more about intellectual honesty.
Yes, the second category is knowledge based purely on estimation, tamin, rather than certainty, yakin.
Guesswork, basically.
Pretty much. If you build a whole system of thought on just a guess, well, that system is harmful mainly to the person holding it, because it means they end up ruling or acting based on ignorance, sell.
Right.
You haven't actually gained real knowledge, you've just sort of dressed up a probability estimate in the fancy clothes of certainty.
That hits close to home today, doesn't it? We live in an age just saturated with predictive modeling, vast systems built on probabilities, stock markets, climate projections, you name it.
Absolutely.
So how does the text draw the line between, say, necessary probability and this blameworthy guesswork?
Well, that distinction actually leads us nicely into the third category, which covers what the text calls superfluous and wasteful knowledge, fuzu. This is like the intellectual equivalent of just diving down endless rabbit holes.
Chasing shiny objects.
Exactly. Engaging in pointless, overly complex debates or trying to acquire really obscure, tiny details of knowledge before you've even mastered the absolute basics.
And the text calls this the ultimate loss, right? Because it wastes life.
Yes. Gayi Hazaret. The ultimate loss. Because it wastes the most precious thing we have. Our time, our life, our Omar-i Aziz. If you spend your life arguing about tiny details that have zero bearing on your spiritual state or your moral condition, well, you've fundamentally wasted your existence, according to this view.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. Let's dig into that second category, the knowledge based on conjecture, using the example the text focuses on. Judicial astrology, ilm-i nücûm, the science of the stars.
Oh, yes.
The text splits this field in two, doesn't it? One part's okay, one part's not.
That's right. First, there's the calculative or astronomical aspect hisabi. That part's actually praiseworthy.
Okay.
It's used for things like reckoning time, understanding seasons, knowing the movements of the sun and the moon. The Quran itself mentions these are governed by exact calculation by husband. So this knowledge is practical, it's useful, navigation, timekeeping.
So the math, the astronomy, that's good. Necessary even.
Right.
But the blameworthy part is the other side. Predicting future events based on those movements.
Yeah.
The actual astrology part, the akam.
Exactly.
Why is that predictive aspect condemned so strongly?
The text gives three really powerful reasons. The first one is deeply cultural, actually. It's the risk of idolatry. It argues this field is most damaging to the masses, the exari halka, because instead of seeing the planets and stars as signs created by God,
They start seeing them as the actual controllers.
precisely, as the real governing deities, the Ali Imudabir. And when that happens, the essential remembrance of God, zikri ilahi, just gets pushed out of their hearts. It gets neglected.
This brings up that wonderful ant analogy from the text, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It explains that problem of cause and effect so well.
It really does. The weak observer is compared to an ant crawling on a piece of paper. The ant sees black ink appearing and thinks the pen is the sole ultimate cause. It just doesn't see the hand holding the pen or the will guiding the hand or the ultimate creator, the mizabibul isbab, behind it all.
Right.
And in the same way, people attribute effects, good harvest, bad luck, whatever, directly to the sun or the stars, and they fail to see God as the ultimate agent.
And the other two reasons given for condemning it,
Yeah.
they basically reinforce why this is just knowledge based on ignorance, right?
Exactly. The condemnation really gets cemented by the lack of certainty. Any correct prediction is just dismissed as mere coincidence, ittifaqi.
A lucky guess.
A lucky guess. Because the observer only knows a few superficial, visible causes, like seeing storm clouds gathering, but they can't possibly know all the hidden causes, the isbaba hafiye, the entire complex system. It's compared to a sailor trying to guess the weather. They often get it wrong because they just don't know every single factor involved.
So the guidance seems pretty clear then. Learn what you need for practical life, like how to navigate.
Right.
And then just stop. Imzak ednis. Don't waste your time on the excess speculation, just like the Caliph Umar advised.
That sums it up perfectly. And it shows how the initial condemnation targets the application of knowledge. Is it useful? Is it harmful?
But now we get to the maybe more insidious problem. The text seems to shift from condemning bad uses of knowledge to condemning the corruption of the very language of faith and wisdom itself.
Yes, the tebdil v'tarif. The shifting and twisting of originally praiseworthy terms is sami mahmûd for corrupt purposes, agraz fasid.
This is where that sense of intellectual betrayal really comes in.
It is. The claim is that the deep, true meanings of core terms like fıkh, spiritual insight, tevhîd, monotheism, tezkîr, admonition, even hikmet, wisdom, were basically hollowed out, stripped down.
And the consequence was significant.
Profound. Because when people then heard, say, a scholar being criticized for lacking true fıkh, their hearts just kind of shrugged it off. They only understood the diminished superficial meaning of the word, so the critique lost its power.
Let's focus on two critical examples of this distortion the text highlights. Starting with fıkh. Now, most people today probably understand that as jurisprudence or Islamic law.
Right, that's the common understanding now.
But what was its original meaning according to this source?
Well, in the earliest era, the Azri Evil, fıkh, was something much bigger. It was comprehensive spiritual understanding. It included knowledge of the hereafter, deep insight into the defects and failings of one's own soul, afat nufus. And this intense, overwhelming fear of God, istila I have. The source even cites a Quranic verse suggesting that true fıkh should lead to warning others, to instilling that sense of fear and awareness. It was deeply internal, deeply spiritual.
But later, it somehow became purely external, procedural. How did that shift happen?
It was drastically restricted. Scholars started defining fıkh only as knowing, strange, minute legal details, the Piuyo Garibe, arguing over obscure points of debate, fitava.
Like divorce regulations.
Exactly. Intricate regulations for divorce or manumission or complex contracts. The focus shifted entirely.
From the quality of the soul to the complexity of the legal footnote.
You could put it that way, yes. And the text explicitly warns that this narrow focus on dry external legal matters actually hardens the heart. Kalbin Kazvitini Muchibir. It distracts scholars, and by extension everyone else, from inward piety, the ilm-i batini, which is seen as the true fruit of fıkh. This narrowing, this restriction, was seen as a kind of deception, a telbais, potentially by scholars who were more interested in worldly status and reputation than in spiritual truth.
I love that example given about Sadbi Ibrahim Missouri. Someone asks him, who's the most jurisprudent person in Medina?
Yes.
And he doesn't name the guy who knows the most case law. He says the one who has the most piety. Ed Cohn.
It's a stunning reversal of what we might expect.
Absolutely. It just hammers home that point.
Yeah.
The purpose of knowledge is always meant to be action, moral transformation, not just intellectual bragging, right?
Precisely. Now let's look at tevhîd, monotheism, the absolute core of belief. Its original meaning, as presented here, was maybe even more radical than we usually think.
How so? What was it?
The original meaning, the core, the lube, was described as this elevated spiritual station, where you see all events, good things, bad things, pain, comfort, everything proceeding only from God. It meant completely cutting off your reliance on, and even your attention to, all secondary causes, all intermediaries, people, things.
Wow. So if you truly understood tevhîd in this deep sense, you wouldn't blame your boss for a bad day, or the weather for ruining your plans, or even your own bad luck.
Not ultimately, no. You look only to the ultimate cause, to God.
And the practical result, the fruit of that deep internal understanding.
Absolute trust, tevekul, forsaking complaint, and just accepting the divine decree, rezavle teslim, with total contentment, even in hardship.
That's beautifully illustrated by that anecdote about Abu Bakr, isn't it?
It is. When he was sick, people offered to get him a doctor, and he replied simply, "The doctor is the one who made me sick."
Meaning God.
Meaning God was the ultimate cause of both the illness and, implicitly, the only true source of the cure. That's the depth of tevhîd the text is talking about.
But again, like with fact, this profound spiritual reality got distorted, reduced to just its outward shell, the kushur.
Exactly. The meaning got watered down to just, verbally declaring there is no God but God, la ilaha illallah. Or maybe just holding the basic belief intellectually without any critical thinking, or more importantly, without applying that deep spiritual reality in your life.
And there's a serious warning attached to that, isn't there?
Yeah.
About neglecting the core.
A very severe warning. The text points out that if you neglect the spiritual core, you inevitably fill that void with yourself, your own ego, your desires, your whims. Have.
Oh.
It quotes the idea that one who follows their heva has basically taken it as their god, their ilah.
So that turns idolatry inward. It's not just about worshiping a physical statue anymore. It's about worshiping your own desires, your own pride.
And according to a saying attributed to the prophet, the most hateful idol worshipped on earth is that very ego, that heva. This creates the ultimate link between misapplied or corrupted knowledge and actual moral ruin. If your knowledge just puffs up your pride, it's not beneficial, it's destructive.
Let's quickly touch on the third corrupted term mentioned, tezkîr, admonition or remembrance.
Right. Originally, tezkîr was focused on genuine spiritual preparation. It meant speaking about things that really matter for the soul. The fear of death, the defects of the self, Satan's whispers, the contemptibility of worldly distractions.
Serious stuff.
Serious, practical stuff. What the source calls praiseworthy remembrance, tezkîr mahmûd, the kind exemplified by early figures like Hassan al-Basri.
But this kind of serious, practical advice got replaced by...
What?
Entertainment?
Essentially, yeah. It got replaced by Qasa's colorful storytelling, maybe exaggerated tales.
Yeah.
By poetry, ishur. And by shaf, these kind of eccentric, sometimes shocking, hyperbolic claims of divine union or mystical states. The text is actually quite critical here. It notes that some earlier scholars strictly forbade even sitting with storytellers, calling it an innovation, a bid'ah. It even cites Imam Ibn Hanbal as saying that storytellers and beggars are the people who lie the most.
Strong words. And what about the danger of that shaf, those ecstatic utterances?
The danger highlighted is the impact on the masses. The text mentions famous examples like Hallaj saying, "I am the reality," in al-Haq, or Yazid al-Bistami's "Glory be to me," Subhani. And the argument is that whether these claims were genuinely experienced mystical states or just misunderstood language, they cause great harm, Zahra Azim, if they reach the general public.
Why? Because the average person hearing that might misunderstand it.
Exactly. They might hear, "I am the reality," and think, oh, well, if he reached that state, maybe I don't need to follow the regular religious rules and actions anymore. They might abandon necessary practices and fall into corruption.
So the message seems consistent. Practicality over performance.
Yes. The text argues that even if those ecstatic claims are genuine for the one saying them, they can cause chaos, fitna, if they encourage people who aren't ready, the uninitiated, to abandon practical deeds for complex, esoteric speculation they can't handle. The rule seems to be always prioritize action and solid understanding over intellectual or spiritual showmanship.
So pulling this all together,
Yeah.
what does it mean for us, for the listener? The text is ultimately trying to be a guide, right? A guide to prioritizing knowledge that genuinely benefits the soul, knowledge that leads to real internal transformation.
That's the core message, I think. And it connects right back to that third reason for blaming knowledge, the superfluous kind.
Right, the wasteful kind.
Because the ultimate emphasis is always on practicality.
Yeah.
And that includes how you share knowledge. There's a quote attributed to the prophet mentioned. Basically, if you speak to people in a way they cannot possibly grasp,
Confuses them.
worse than confuses, it actually creates fitna for them, chaos, disorder, maybe even leads them astray. The implication is, speak to people according to the capacity of their intellects. If your knowledge creates intellectual confusion instead of clarity of purpose, then that knowledge itself becomes blameworthy in its effect.
It's about comprehension leading to action, not just complexity for its own sake. Makes sense. But before we wrap up, the text makes two really interesting exceptions to this rule against conjecture, doesn't it?
Ah, yes, that's a key point.
It says the science of medicine, ilm-i, and the interpretation of dreams, tabir, were never prohibited. Even though they often rely heavily on estimation or conjecture, why were those fields spared?
Well, the reasoning given is that they serve a necessary and fundamentally non-destructive function. Medicine aims to preserve life, which is considered essential for worship and serving God. And dream interpretation, while definitely conjectural, was considered by some to be a part of prophecy, a component of divine revelation, however faint. So they don't fall into that category of useless speculation that just hardens the heart or leads people into moral ruin. They have a recognized purpose.
Okay, that clarifies things. So we've journeyed through these three gates of blameworthy knowledge: the directly harmful, the purely conjectural, and the utterly superfluous. And we've seen this powerful argument about how the very language of wisdom got distorted, shifting from deep inward spiritual understanding to, well, outward legalism or just pointless guessing games.
The danger ultimately isn't presented as knowledge itself. It can't be, given its divine origin.
Right.
The danger is the wasting of your precious time and the distraction of your heart from its true purpose, its connection with the divine.
So the ultimate lesson for the learner, for anyone seeking knowledge.
It seems to be that simply accumulating knowledge is secondary. What matters most is the quality of that knowledge and how you apply it. The goal is to move beyond the dry shells, the couche, of debate and mere legalism.
Towards the fruit.
Towards the food, the lube, the inward fear, the deep reliance on God, the transformation of the self. That's the knowledge deemed truly praiseworthy.
So let's leave our listeners with this thought. If the greatest wisdom, according to this text, lies in discerning between knowledge that genuinely benefits your soul and leads to action, and knowledge that simply wastes your most precious capital, your time, how do you evaluate the sources you consume daily? Are you focusing on the core purpose that prompts meaningful change? Or are you getting caught up chasing those esoteric details, the firu garibe, that perhaps, as the text warns, merely harden the heart?